After more than 2 decades, US troops have completed their final withdrawal from Afghanistan, bringing the war to an end. And this will likely become one of the most iconic images of that conflict. An American officer boarding the last flight out of Kabul just hours before the August 31st deadline. Now, immediately after the US departure, this is how the Taliban celebrated. With gunfire and fireworks, the hardline Islamist group is now in charge of Kabul airport and the entire country. Its fighters posed for pictures as they inspected the abandoned aircraft left behind. So what now? The Taliban are left with the job of governing the country, and the international community must decide how to deal with Afghanistan's new rulers. And here's where the way forward isn't quite clear. But take a look at what some world powers have been saying. At a press conference on Monday, US Secretary of State Antony Blinken said, and I quote, "The Taliban seeks international legitimacy and support. Our position is any legitimacy and support will have to be earned." Now, it's a similar sentiment here in Europe. Here's what German Chancellor Angela Merkel and French President Emmanuel Macron have said in recent days.
And our aim must be to ensure that as many of the changes that we've achieved in the last 20 years be preserved. The international community must also have talks with the Taliban, but there cannot be any unconditional agreements with them.
Those who are in control of Kabul and of Afghanistan are the Taliban. So from an operational perspective, in practical terms, we need to have those discussions. This is what we have started to do. By we, I mean the international community. It doesn't imply that we will recognize them, because we have laid out conditions.
And for more, I'm joined by Velina Chakarova. She's director of the think tank, the Austrian Institute for European and Security Policy, and joins me now from Vienna. Velina, welcome. How does the West intend to engage with the Taliban?
Let me first stress that these current developments have been clearly a shock, a kind of a deeply traumatic one for the West, specifically for the transatlantic allies of the United States. And the European powers are still making sense of the developments, specifically when it comes to the future role that they can play and how to actually deal with a Taliban regime. So international recognition is currently not on the table. In fact, the European powers, specifically Germany, France, UK, are also not included in the so-called Troika Plus format consisting of United States, China, Russia, and Pakistan, dealing with the Taliban in Doha, Qatar. So this is also a kind of a lack of political engagement for them, which also means that probably following the US troops withdrawal, they will try to reach out, on the one hand, of course, to Washington in order to coordinate positions, specifically when it comes to the recognition, but also they will reach out likely to China and Russia to try to establish political channels with the Taliban.
I do intend to speak about China and Russia with you because I know that is your particular area of expertise. But just on the question of Germany and France, because we just heard what Angela Merkel and Emmanuel Macron had to say, they essentially spoke of conditional engagement with the Taliban. And I'm just wondering what these conditions are.
Conditional engagement from a European perspective would include, of course, the humanitarian situation on the ground. The European Union and the member states fear a huge refugee crisis, one that might be repeated by the 2015 episode. And they also fear that this kind of refugee crisis might be instrumentalized by external powers such as Russia. So this would be one condition, of course, how the Taliban will treat the civilian population. Second will be the dealing with refugee waves. third would be also the political conditions. That mean, how will the Taliban manage to actually conduct the power transfer from a local perspective, provincial perspective, of course, and then at the top of the power in Afghanistan. And that means that certainly there is the realization that the European powers will conduct talks with the Taliban in the future. However, this kind of conditions must be fulfilled first.
I'm just wondering, how realistic is the expectation that the Taliban will fulfill humanitarian goals? I mean, just saying humanitarian and Taliban in the same sentence, I mean, I don't know how realistic our expectations should be.
Well, let me remind that France and United Kingdom already have tabled a UN resolution proposal for the establishment of a safe zone in Kabul to protect people fleeing from Afghanistan. And in reality, the UN Security Council adopted a resolution which actually did not cite a safe zone, as mentioned by, for instance, the French President Macron. So that is already quite revealing that we should be very cautious when it comes to promises and actions on the ground.
Now, of course, the crucial part of this equation is the Taliban. I'd just like to sort of play for our viewers what the Taliban has said so far about engaging with the world, and then we'll come back and continue our discussion.
We have said that we want good relations with all the world, specifically Russia and other countries in the region. My message to them is that they must not feel any danger from Afghanistan.
That was Zabiullah Mujahid, the Taliban spokesperson there that you heard talking, Velina. I wonder, why does the Taliban mention Russia in particular? And if by other countries in the region, does it mean China as well?
In my view, China will be the key actor that will be seeking to fill the void, the so-called political, but also geo-economic and security vacuum in Afghanistan following the US troops withdrawal. However, China will do this in coordinated manner with Russia and likely with other regional actors such as Pakistan and Iran. And that is also the reason why the Taliban is quite familiar with the so-called realpolitik on the ground, knowing who the main actors are. So there has been already a official state visit by the Taliban to Russia prior to the takeover, as well as such visits to China, and that is quite revealing how actually these two countries have been preparing for a potential power transfer in the hands of the Taliban. Also, I would like to stress that the Taliban is still on the list of banned terrorist organizations in Russia, which has not prevented Moscow from having political talks. And even during the whole takeover in the last several weeks, there has been actually active political meetings, for instance, at the Russian embassy, which has been, in fact, protected by the Taliban on the ground.
Talk to us a bit about China specifically. I mean, as you say, it is likely to try and fill the void in Afghanistan. What exactly are China's interests in Afghanistan, and how do they match up with Russia's?
So first and foremost, we should look at this kind of unprecedented systemic coordination between Russia and China as, or what I call the dragon bear, as really unique, as a game changer in the dynamics of global affairs, and particularly now in Afghanistan. Now, China has several main goals, so to say. On the one side, it seeks to prevent all-out civilian war from happening in Afghanistan. So any kind of destabilization in the country is detrimental to Chinese, but also Russian interest. Any insurgencies that might lead to spillover effects coming from Afghanistan towards the Chinese province Xinjiang, but also Central Asian countries, which Russia actually considers as the security and geopolitical underbelly of Moscow, are to be prevented. And finally, there are very strong geoeconomic interests on the ground, such as the potential exploration of minerals and rare earths deposits, being worth at around 1 to 3 trillion US dollars, according to Geological Service, and also the potential of including Afghanistan into, or incorporating Afghanistan into, China's Belt and Road and China-Pakistan economic corridor in the long term.
So, Velina, what do you see China doing differently to what the US and EU have already tried to do in Afghanistan? Essentially, how will China succeed with the Taliban where other countries have failed?
What I see as a different approach, or I anticipate as a different approach, is that China will not actually seek to fight the Taliban or to remove them from power, but will actually seek to accommodate with them by providing, so to say, geoeconomic carrots, due to the fact that the Taliban have been actually isolated already by the international community. So international loans at programs have been blocked. This is one way how they can actually tackle the regime in the future. And the second is, of course, by providing them future opportunities through the Belt and Road, through other economic energy transport corridors that Beijing is eager to build, once again, not alone, but together with other regional partners. And that is, I think, the different approach that Washington, unfortunately, has failed to launch over the last 20 years.
We'll leave it there for the time being, but thank you so much for joining us. Velina Chakarova from the Austrian Institute for European and Security Policy. Thank you.
Thank you for having me.